The world-renowned city of Oxford. A richly diverse population with a strong community spirit. Oxford is alive, a hive of activity with the city's economy one of the strongest in the country, making Oxfordshire as a region one of the most attractive in the country. But as things stand, the lack of affordable housing throughout the county is a direct challenge to the region's continued growth. This documentary will represent views of businesses, council members and the public to deliver a better understanding of the issues we all face. As of 2019, Oxford remains one of the most expensive cities in which to buy a home in the whole of Europe. Average house prices are 17 times average earnings, with the average wage in Oxford being over £30,000. A growing percentage of the 43,506 30 to 34-year-olds in Oxfordshire still live with parents, mostly owing to difficulties in affording a home. And that figure does not include the growing number of young families resorting to living with parents.
Unable to move out, unable to save for our own house. This is how it is. Still living with parents. That's not how I thought, it would be, but unfortunately, that's how it is.
I'm originally from up north, South Yorkshire, and when I found out that my partner still lived with his parents, I was quite speechless, to be honest. Me and my sister did think, why is he still living with his parents? But now I know why, anyway.
For many young adults, the inability to afford one's own place causes issues and delays with progressing their interpersonal relationships. Changes to welfare only exacerbate the problem, meaning fewer and fewer young adults from 20 to 34 have the chance to become independent. So how did Oxford's housing situation get so bad? Bob Price is the former leader of Oxford City Council, and as such has clear insight into how the city struggles.
Well, the core reason for the problem of housing in Oxford is the lack of affordable land. The city is pretty well full up, and the sites that are available are difficult to develop and expensive to develop. So the real problem was the fact that we needed to move outside the city, and the Greenbelt prevents that to be done very easily. So that's the central reason. Second reason is that there is a major problem of capacity in industry, where they will choose easy sites to develop, which can be done with profit, and they don't exist in the city. So there's a second problem there. The third problem was the lack of government support for social housing. All governments, really since about the middle of the 90s, have withdrawn progressively support from social housing.
Open House in Jericho is a short-term project designed to support those of us who cannot secure housing.
So what Open House is trying to do is create a space where people feel really welcome and able to participate in the conversations. Housing is the issue facing our city. At the moment, if you're one of the people who keeps our city running, drives our buses, cleans our street, does all of these essential jobs, you can't live in Oxford at the moment. And it's not going to be much longer before the city grinds to a halt without those people.
Living in Oxford isn't a realistic goal for most people that work in the city. So where do the city's workers commute from?
As an employer here, we are seeing our employees sort of getting priced out of the market and actually having to move further and further away from Oxford. So when we do a map showing where all our employees live, we've got employees living, an hour and a half's drive time from North Oxford in terms of being able to find affordable housing and sort of good quality education. So, it impacts, not just our business as property consultants, but our business as employers.
It's not surprising how many of the Carter Jonas team live outside of the Oxford Ring Road. What is surprising are the number of team members that commute from far outside of Oxfordshire itself, including Bristol, York and Sheffield. Housing in close proximity to the city is clearly needed, although the strain on infrastructure that new developments cause is something that is having an impact on all businesses.
Well, it means that the people that we do attract to work for us have to travel further, so it's not uncommon for people to travel sort of 25 miles from places such as Swindon, Reading, Northampton, Cheltenham. So people are actually travelling further, which impacts on their fatigue as well, causes fatigue whilst they're working for us. And it also means, more fundamentally, that we have to pay the highest pay rates for bus drivers in the country, even higher than London, because people basically have to be compensated for the further distance that they have to travel to work for us.
With businesses feeling the pinch and struggling to attract the right kind of employment, the Oxford economy could quite possibly suffer. Can businesses do anything to help combat the issue?
Local authorities, businesses are now starting to look at different options. And I guess the other thing to reflect on is some of those businesses are now starting to take those challenges on themselves. And I guess one of the most significant examples of that is Blenheim. So if you look at Blenheim as a business, as well as a World Heritage Site and an internationally recognised place, Blenheim Estate are providing, again, quality housing for their staff, but also for the community.
With housing stock in Oxfordshire so low and prices so high, who is buying property?
Looking at New Zealand, so New Zealand's the most unaffordable place for New Zealanders, as in local residents, to buy property in their own country. It's far more unaffordable than anywhere else in the world, because there was a massive push around getting external investors to buy properties. So it's completely out of reach for local people. And Auckland as a city has just started to introduce limits about who can purchase properties in their city. You know, you look at the income flows coming into Oxford and who's buying the property. It's very difficult to actually see who owns property and who is buying property. But you can bet your bottom dollar it's not your average ordinary Joe. And that's the group that needs support. So we just need to choose who the city's for.
Millennials, now all at an age where they are looking for homes and the target for many employers in the city, are the ones most hit by the lack of housing in Oxfordshire. Compared to the prices their parents experienced, houses in the most expensive cities such as Oxford and London are clearly out of reach at their current rates.
With the deposit that we've got, which is around about 40 grand deposit, and then we've got a decent combined salary, and we're still looking at somewhere that's 45 minutes away from Oxford, just for Paul to get into town and go to work. And
I don't have to go to work.
You do, because we can't afford a house otherwise. But to get a 3-bed house. My dad bought his house. It was a 3-bed, 1930 semi-detached in Risinghurst, and he bought that in 1997, and he paid under £80,000 for it. What is that? There's not enough houses, and then when they do build houses, the area where we live in Yarnton here, they built this whole development that we're on, and there's quite a new number of houses, and they're quite affordable. But you look at the Barton Park development, and you go, no one can afford that.
Housing developers in Oxfordshire have a legal requirement to provide social housing, which can inflate the price of other homes on the development. Who has the final say on the price of these houses?
Currently, a developer can say how viable a development is. So they can say to a local council, for example, okay, so you want 1 in 10 homes to be social, or in Oxford's case, 4 in 10 homes to be available for social rent. That means the other 6, to make it viable, are going to have to be very expensive to pay for that. Now, it's just the developer who does that calculation. There's nobody checking it. There's nobody able to challenge it, because it's purely in their hands. We say that's got to change so that you can have an independent assessment of it. Because, I can imagine for people looking at Barton Park, for example, it's really, really good that we've got so many social homes. But then the ticket price for a lot of the rest of the homes is incredibly expensive. That's really frustrating for people, I think, just totally beyond their reach.
Is it too late for millennials and upcoming generations to live in the city they were born in?
We know that co-living is not for everybody, but is increasingly popular around the world, particularly when combined with a co-work philosophy. And I think there's some opportunities there potentially as well to really focus on the millennials and, in fact, the people, the talent and the people who a lot of Oxford businesses are trying to recruit.
Since March 2015, only 20 households took advantage of the government's Help to Buy equity loan scheme, compared to 2,217 households in Milton Keynes. With Help to Buy clearly not working for Oxfordshire, is it about time the city had a different approach to housing from the government?
So I think we do need a tailored response that responds to our particular housing market situation. There are other forms of shared ownership which are playing an important part, particularly elsewhere in Oxfordshire. And in the city, we're trying to encourage more shared ownership that is more affordable than the Help to Buy model. We do need the ability to be able to understand, identify and cater to the different needs. Going back to the housing deal, it's a sort of step in that direction. So I would say it would be good if we're successful in that. We can hopefully demonstrate to government why a bespoke approach and a bespoke kind of flexibilities for Oxfordshire would work.
To get more people into housing, perhaps the traditional routes for owning and renting need to be rethought.
We've got a couple of cooperatives here in Oxford that are both solving the solution of high housing costs, of high rent, but also giving people control to extend and paint and change their environment that you don't get with the private rental sector. And so they've got nicer environments to live within shared housing. So probably talking about people that might be on the minimum wage or Oxford living wage who can't access home ownership because they can't get the savings. I think what we need to do is focus on how to capture the value of land and reduce the value of land, because the actual material cost of housing hasn't gone up significantly beyond inflation over the last 40 years. It's the cost of land that's rocketing. So we need to have strategies for doing that. We would look to community land trusts in order to do that. And overall, you need different ways of financing schemes. So not passing the risk onto individual homeowners in this case. If we're talking about home ownership, giving people an individual mortgage for 25 years at a percentage rate that's subject to inflation and passing that risk onto the individual once you've built it, I don't think is socially responsible anymore. I think there's a lot of room now for conversations about bigger shared mortgages, a block of flats, say 40 units, all getting one big mortgage, all sharing that burden, that risk. It becomes an easier investment for pension funds, for councils, for bigger financial institutions. And for this city, the university, the college, the hospitals, all these institutions can start getting involved in investing in longer term, low risk housing that doesn't place the burden on the household.
24% of Oxford's population is made up of students, exacerbating Oxford's housing problems. With the University of Oxford having such a huge influence on housing in the city, what are they doing to help?
In Oxford, we have 11,000 undergraduates at any one time, 12,000 postgraduates, about 15,000 members of staff. So housing is a crucial issue for us. We see it as a major responsibility to provide accommodation for undergraduates, so we take pressure off the local housing market. We do as much as we can for postgraduates, and we have many thousands of units of accommodation for postgraduates. And we're just starting an initiative to provide subsidised accommodation for university staff as well. And we're looking to start building a large new community for university staff just north of Oxford at Begbrook.
Karen Curtin is the Managing Director of Graven Hill, an alternative development that's offering Oxfordshire the chance to self-build.
So we're looking to really promote self-build and custom build, but we want to make sure that it's from everybody, so anybody from a first-time buyer up to someone that's thinking about downsizing and wanting to reshape their home for their future needs. So I think housing in Oxfordshire needs some solutions, and I think Graven Hill provides a number of options for people. So in order to build community, you want people of all different shapes, sizes, colours, creeds, demographics, and really that's really what we want in Graven Hill.
It's clear that additional housing of any kind needs to be supported by a community to survive. Incremental development is no good. The Greenbelt takes up over 66,000 hectares of space in and around Oxford, turning the city into an island. Similar to cities built on islands like Hong Kong and New York, finite space does nothing to help house prices. The possibility of building on Greenbelt certainly splits opinion. What would the solution be if we were to stay within Oxford's borders? How would we keep the spirit of Oxford intact?
I think it becomes very political. Personally, I don't think we need to be building on Greenbelt. My personal view is there's plenty of other, as we've described it, brownfield, inner urban land or land within the city boundaries that can be developed. I think that's the first point. Secondly, it's crucial in any new development, housing or otherwise, that there's a lot of sympathy and contextual analysis given to everything that surrounds it. Oxford has a massively strong and rich history back into the medieval ages, and we don't want in any way to dilute that. That doesn't mean, however, that you can't build really high quality modern housing that complements a lot of the old architecture. You can go high, but high isn't always the solution. I'm not convinced that high is the solution for Oxford, but you can certainly go denser. You can look at different housing models, and you can better utilise the space that's currently inefficiently used.
Clearly, Greenbelt is there for a good reason, which is to stop, urban sprawl and stop, Oxford and Reading eventually just becoming one thing. But it was basically created, in 1960, and it's not necessarily full of highly valuable amenity and wildlife land. So I think locally, what you need to do, and what our local plan's doing, is to look at, well, where are the most sensible areas of that Greenbelt that you could release, because they are well connected into existing transport networks. They reduce the need and the cost of travelling in and out.
With many people in Oxfordshire relying on benefits to support their wages, is the current system up to scratch?
So it used to be that people could receive housing benefit that would top up their salary a lot of the time. So a lot of the people we're talking about would be working, or if they weren't able to work, that would give them the means they need to stay somewhere in our city. The rules around housing benefit have changed pretty radically. You may well have talked to other people about this, but now housing benefit doesn't even remotely relate to the cost of housing in Oxford. And that is a big problem, because it means people's funds to pay for other things are just getting totally squeezed out, and that's a big issue.
It's clear Oxford and the county are in a state of imbalance. Homes need to be built, but so does the supporting infrastructure. New housing must succeed in creating communities so that new developments have a pulse and provide positive growth for the city and county. A final decision on the Greenbelt must be made, and, if built on, sensible, well-planned development is a must. Truly affordable homes of all types must be provided, as it is clear that no one solution will fix the issue, an issue which is clearly threatening more than just the economic growth of the region. All of this must be supported by the government, both local and national. Otherwise, the UK could potentially lose a key economic player.
It's not going to be just a business solution, just a housing solution, just an infrastructure solution. We've got to get them in balance.